Good morning and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by MACF and Florida Makes. I'm your host, Sherry Reeves, along with Christian Davison. Today is September 24th, 2020, and we are starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Today's topic, Reach Customers Online with Google. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Matt Weber, President of ROAR and the National Google Supported Trainer. ROAR offers internet marketing and much more to several industries, including manufacturing, healthcare, and home services. These industries are incredibly competitive categories to conquer, and ROAR understands the unique complexities of each and know just how to make your business or practice the marketing frontrunner in your industry. With years of digital marketing experience and success in these industries, ROAR saves you time, money with proven industry-specific strategies. ROAR has been a long-standing member and partner of manufacturers in Central Florida and statewide. Pam Weber, Vice President of ROAR, has served on the MACF Board of Directors and has been a member since 2009. I would like to thank Pam for setting up this webinar and our guest speaker. A few housekeeping notes. As a participant, your audio will be in listen-only mode using your phone or computer, whichever is more convenient. Additionally, you will have the opportunity to ask your question using the question window. This is a live webinar event which will be recorded. A link to the recording will be provided to you within a few hours. Now, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Matt. Thank you, Matt, and good morning.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Reach Customers Online with Google. Now, normally, Grow with Google is a program that offers in-person instruction throughout the country. And pre-COVID, I would have been traveling the country to deliver this program in person. But since COVID, all of our instructional materials have been adapted for webinars just like this. When I'm not teaching for Grow with Google, as Sherry mentioned, I'm the president of ROAR Internet Marketing in Altamont Springs. This is one of my favorite programs to present. And the reason it's my favorite program to present is that it deals with content that most business owners need to master. So today we're going to talk about the entire Google complex, meaning the whole ecosystem, because the more you understand the ecosystem, the better you can use it to succeed with your business. And that's why today's program is going to talk specifically about a 30,000-foot view of the Google search ecosystem. And we're going to look at some of the fundamental parts to it so that you can use them more effectively. And then second thing that we're going to do is we're going to answer your most natural question that's going to arise from part one. And that's going to be, well, that's great, but how do I get better and how do I show up more often in those parts that you showed in part one? And that's what we're going to talk about in part two. And in part three, we're going to take a little bit of a different look at advertising online, because we're going to look at it as both an advertising medium and a research medium. So we're going to talk about how to research customers with online advertising. So let's go to the very beginning and let's talk about all those pieces and parts in the Google ecosystem that can help you reach your customers. But before we do that, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a moment like this?
People ask us all the time, how do I get into it?
Have you ever had a moment like that? I had one just about a month ago. I decided to change the radio in my 95 Jeep Wrangler, one of my prized possessions. Now, I was pretty sure I could do this job in about an hour, maybe 2 hours. Now, my wife, Pam, by the way, had zero confidence that I could accomplish this at all, let alone in 2 hours. But to her credit, she's had 30 years of witnessing my mechanical and electrical skills. So, of course, I attacked this job, and I couldn't prove to her that I couldn't do it. And you know what? 9 hours later, I proved her wrong. I got that radio in there. I just couldn't tell her that the lights of the car wouldn't work and the car wouldn't start. So at that point, I'm having one of those moments. I am Googling. I've got my iPad out and I'm searching changing radio on 95 Jeep Wrangler, wiring for radio on 95 Jeep Wrangler. I am Googling. And what do I come upon across? I come upon a company that actually does mobile audio work for cars. Didn't even know that existed. So just the next day, they came to my house, they fixed what I ruined, and we were able to get the radio working in the car fully functioning. The point is, people have those moments and they go to the web to solve problems. And my experience, very similar to yours, happens all the time. In fact, there are billions of searches every month, and 4 out of 5 consumers say they use search engines to find things like vendors and stores and addresses and hours and directions. People go to the web to solve a problem. Now, that's key for businesses, right? Because if we know that people go to the web to solve a problem, we want to position ourselves as the solution to their problem. So let's elevate this conversation to about 30,000 feet, and let's talk about how this information gets in the hands of consumers. Well, it all starts with a piece of software called a web crawler. Now, a lot of companies have web crawler software, and a web crawler does exactly what that name implies. It crawls the web, and in the early days, we used to call these spiders, and people call them spiders because of the way they would travel from one link on one website to another link on another website, and they would travel the web in a way that a spider would travel a web. Now, Google's web crawler has a name. It's called the Google bot. If you went to the server logs of your website, it would literally say, Google bot was here on this day and for this time, and it stayed this long. Now, when the Google bot comes to your website, it's crawling your website, traveling through by the links on pages, and as it's doing that, it's sending information back to Google servers. So it's traveling and sending at the same time. Now, as it's sending information back to Google servers, Google's organizing that content. And as you can imagine, that content can be organized in a number of different ways. So I want you to think for just a second about a deck of 52 cards. And if I said, hey, can you organize those cards? There's a number of ways you could do it. You could organize them all the 2s together, all the 3s together, all the 4s together. You could organize them by all the suits together. You could organize them by all the face cards together. And kind of the same thing with websites. So Google is making these massive indexes of all the information in your website and everybody else's to get them in an order so that it can return just the right website to the searcher. And all that happens in real time. In fact, think about this for just a second. In the time that it takes you to snap your fingers, Google just processed 40,000 searches in real time. Now, when we talk about that index, there's about over 200 different factors, or what Google calls signals, that go into those different ways of arranging all of that information. Now, we can make search engine optimization as complicated as it is, and it's really quite complicated, but think of this as really functioning just like a dating website would function. And two things have to happen in order for that match to be successful. On the one hand, Google has to understand what is the searcher's real intent. What are they really trying to do? And so Google looks at a number of things. They look at the time of day, they look at the location, they look at the device the searcher's using, they look at the searcher's past history, lots of signals to figure out what the searcher really wants. And then on the other side, they have to understand what your website's about. They have to be able to take that information that the web crawler sent back and understand it. In the next section, we're going to talk about what things may be preventing Google from understanding what your website's about. So we've got to have good information on the searcher side, what are they trying to achieve, and we've got to have good information about your website's really about to see if there's a match, and then Google can return that. Now on the consumer side, this whole process really starts with a very simple action, and that's when the searcher types what we call a query into the Google search bar. And you know, if we stopped right here and reflected for a minute, we'd realize that marketing has really changed in a way that few people can appreciate. Because there was a time when we all were taught, oh, we've got to know our consumers' demographics. I'm trying to reach women 25 to 54. And then maybe that evolved and we were taught that we have to understand our consumers' psychographics. Oh, I'm trying to reach women 25 to 54 who are trying to change the world, make it a better place. But really today, we have to understand our prospects and our consumers' vocabulary. We have to understand how do they describe what we do. And this is pivotal because as I work with small businesses, I often find that business owners use a different set of words to describe what they do than what consumers do. And I want to share a little story with you. For a long time, we did the marketing for a set of vein clinics here in Orlando, and they were run by just an incredibly smart gentleman, very, very smart. And I remember vividly the day that we started working with him, and I handed him the list of keywords that we were pursuing, and one of them was vein removal. And he looked at me and he said, Matt, we don't remove the veins. We don't take the veins out of the leg. And I said, yeah, I got it. But guess what consumers think, right? It's not what we want to say that is important in 2020. It's what the prospects and the consumers want to hear. So often I find there's a misalignment between how the company sells and what they present and what the searchers use to type into Google to find that particular service. Now, once we push enter or the consumer pushes enter on that search, there's a couple things that are going to show up on that search engine results page, which is also called the SERP, by the way, S-E-R-P, a SERP, that are pivotal to your success if you appear on that Google search engine results page. First among those is the URL. We'll see a page title. And by the way, we should also stop here and reflect on the fact that as people get more and more specific on how they search, it's not our homepage that's showing up in Google search results. More often, it's an interior page that deals with that specific topic that's coming up in these Google search engine results pages. So not too long ago, a lot of websites had what were called ugly URLs, right? It would be website.com/page ID equals 1433 database element, da 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 da. Most websites today have what are called friendly URLs. So it's yourwebsite.com and a string of English words that hopefully help describe what that content of the page is. And now as you step back and look at it, you can see that that is a cue or a signal for the consumer to help determine what that page is about. And that affects whether or not they're going to click on your particular link. And the same is true for something called a page title. Each one of the pages on your website has what's called a page title, and that title was put there either by you or by your web developer or by your search engine optimization person or vendor. And that too is not only a cue for the user looking at the search engine results page like you are on the screen, but it's also a cue for the Google bot itself. Because the Google bot, it's going to say, well, you wouldn't put a sign over a barber shop that says jeweler. So you wouldn't put a page title over a page that doesn't reflect what the page is about. So it puts some weight on that page title. But then consumers also use that page title displayed on the SERP as, again, an indicator to figure out if that page is about what they're looking for. And the same is true for something called a description. And when the description appears on a Google search engine results page, it's called a snippet. But this description is something that perhaps you put into your website, or your web developer, or your search engine optimization person. And it's typically character limited. And again, it gives the user some clue as to what the page is going to be about. In fact, this is so important that sometimes you'll find that Google may see a sentence or two on your website page that it thinks is more relevant to what the page is about, and it may show that page, that sentence, over the description that you've put in, because the algorithm thinks that it's a closer match to what the page is about. But in general, these page descriptions are something that the users on the SERP skim to be able to see what page they should click on. And then in some situations, you might see what's known as a business profile. And this emanates from a free tool called Google My Business. And if a business profile does show up, in general, it means that the search probably either had a brand name in it, or it might have had a local geographic indicator. For example, manufacturer of blank in name of city. When it's got that geographic indicator in it, then Google may display a business profile. And we're going to talk more about Google My Business and the business profile coming up. Now, in some searches, you do see ads. In fact, most searches you see ads. In some of them, you see shopping ads, and shopping ads are the ones with the pictures and the price and the link that can take you right to that particular product. Shopping ads in general are only available to you if you're running an e-commerce website and you have something called a Google Merchant Center and you have a product data feed. What's happening when you see those shopping ads is that's Google using that product data feed to go into those advertisers' database, pull out the product photo, pull out the product description, and pull out the product price, all in real time. But if there aren't shopping ads available for that particular search, then we're typically going to see text ads. And in general, we'll see 3 on the top of the page and 3 on the bottom. In a highly competitive search, we may see 4 at the top. Now, at the bottom of a search engine results page, and a lot of people don't get to the bottom, there's a treasure chest for everybody listening to the program today. And what Google does is it shows you searches that are related to the query. Because throughout today's program, I think you're going to begin to think about, what words do people use to search for my product or my service? And as you're evolving that discussion and you're doing some sample searches to figure that out, which is a key objective, by the way, if you go to the bottom of that search engine results page, you'll notice these related searches. And for some of you who pay attention to this, you may notice that years ago, all of these would have begun with the same words that the initial query began with. But now that's no longer the case. Now you see the queries that match up with the intent. Remember, we talked about intent earlier on, that match the intent that other people had when they were typing things into Google. So even if the words didn't match, if Google determined the intent match, it's going to show you those other queries that people used. So a good exercise after today's program is simply go to google.com, of course, and search for words and phrases that you think people would use to find your product or your service. And so to take a look to see if your business shows up, and if not, who does show up? And if you realize that yours isn't showing up, or if it's not showing up as high as you think it should, then this section number 2 in our program today is going to be particularly valuable. And that's resources to help you appear across Google. One of the easiest, quickest, fastest ways to appear more often on Google is to make sure that your business profile on Google My Business is up to date and claimed. So let's go through some names here. Google My Business is the name of a directory. In fact, it's the largest and most widely used business directory on the internet, and there's nothing even close to it. So at the very least, you want to be able to claim your business profile on that. So if somebody is searching your brand name, or if somebody has a geographically related search to where you are, you want your business profile to be able to show up on that. Now, here's the other reason why Google My Business profiles are becoming more and more important, and this is worth writing down. People are fundamentally lazy on the internet. Yeah, And so the more we make them click, the more we make them work to find what they want, the more likely we are to lose them. So sometimes these business profiles are simply gateways. Right? People are just looking for a high-level basic piece of information. Are you open right now? Do you carry blank? And if they have to struggle to get that gateway information, then they kind of turn around and go another direction. But if they see that they can get positive answers to those, what I call gateway questions, then they proceed and they go further and deeper and visit your website. But we can lose a lot of people by simply not having the answers that they're looking for on this Google My Business profile. And I want to remind you, it's absolutely free. And this is how your business shows up on Google Maps, by the way. And some of that Google Maps data is sold to other websites. All right, now let's get a little bit deeper, because some of you came to the program today to learn how to appear more often in what are called organic, or some people call the natural results of Google. Now, we could literally talk for 3 days about search engine optimization. So what I'm going to talk about here are the high-level elements and where most businesses tend to go wrong, and where you can make some of the quickest, largest strides in appearing more often in these organic results. So a couple tips. Number one, relevant, and I'm going to add the word helpful, original content. Remember, people go to the web to solve a problem, by and large. And being in alignment with what they're trying to solve really helps you provide value, which then helps you appear more often in searches. And this is a little bit different way of thinking about your website content, because how often do you go to somebody's website and the first couple sentences are, "We were formed in 1993 under the principles of honesty, integrity, and trustworthiness, and our leadership team has over 60 years experience," right? Does that sound familiar? But how much of that really helps people solve a problem? Not much, right? And too often I go to companies' websites and the first thing I see is some variation of their mission statement. Now, nobody ever did business with somebody online because they found a mission statement that really resonated with them. Today, people are very pragmatic and, let's use this word, selfish when it comes to their Google searches. They're purposeful and they're trying to achieve something specific. So the more you align your content about helping them rather than selling them, the more successful you're going to be online. In fact, I tell people that you have to think like the Red Cross for just a second when you're thinking about your website content. And what's the Red Cross's mission in life? To help people. So take the orientation of your mission is to help people, and then look at your website content from that perspective and ask yourself, does it really bring value to a user, or does it merely extol your sales points that you've been putting out for quite some time? It's a bit of a shift. So hint number two, logical organization. Now, what do we mean by this when we talk about an organized website? I imagine at some point in your career, you've probably worked with two different types of people. I'm sure you've worked with the type of person whose idea of filing was to just throw things on the desk, create this massive pile, and you might have heard them say, well, I know where everything is. And then at some point in your career, you probably worked with the kind of person who could go through a label maker a week, because they had the green Penaflex folders, and then the green Penaflex folders were subdivided with the yellow manila folders, and then they may have been subdivided in some way, right? We both worked with those two different types of people. Now, if you had to take over the jobs of one of those two types of people, which one would be easier to understand what they do, right? The highly organized, the green Penaflex folder person would. Now, think about the Googlebot's role. The Googlebot's coming to a website, and it's in that position of taking over somebody's job or understanding what that website's about. And if the content is poorly organized, like that person who just throw things on the corner of a desk, it's going to have trouble discerning what the website is about. But if the content is highly organized and logically placed, the bot has a better chance of understanding the meaning of the content, which is crucial, as we talked about at the beginning of the program, to be able to create that match. But what really does an organized website look like? you've probably gone to somebody's website, and maybe this is a description of your own website, where there's one page called services, and on that page it says we do A, we do B, we do C, we do D, we do E, and we do F. And you might go to a competitor's website, and maybe they've devoted an entire page to A, and a separate page to B, and a separate page to C and D and E and F. Now the bot comes across that first website and it tries to consume this page. This is about A, B, C, D, E, F, and it says, I don't really know whether the page is about A or B or C or D. And then it goes to the competitor's website and it sees this really well-organized page that is just fundamentally about topic A. I think you can see which one's going to be returned. So now I think you're beginning to see where all these pieces fit together. Number one, we have to understand, what do people search for? What's the problems they're having? And then we create content that is alignment about that topic. Now, as we get more specific about that content, here's where the structure comes into play. Think about your family chart for just a minute. If you visualize your family tree, you can get a sense that you get your meaning from your parents, and then you flow meaning down to your children if you have them. Well, websites are kind of the same way, and we use the word taxonomy or data structure in how websites are built. So think about a home page, and then pages underneath that home page in the structure are the children pages of the home page, and those pages may have children pages. So let's say I had a parent page that was about types of oranges, and it talked about how there are many, many types of oranges that are used for many different types of purposes, and they grow in different regions. But then underneath that page, I had a specific detail page that was about navel oranges and nectarines and the different types of oranges. You see those specific child pages about the specific types of oranges get some of their meaning about being an orange, a type of orange, because they're children of a page types of oranges, right? Does that make sense? So how your website is built, how it's structured, how the data is organized can help you go a long way in ranking for that level of content. It's all about creating context through the structure of the website and how that content is organized. The third tip to talk about is those page titles and descriptions that we looked at in the SERP. We definitely know their cues for the reader on that search engine results page. And think about it for just a second. When a user is faced with anywhere from 10 to 12 results on a Google search engine results page, what determines which one do they click on? Certainly placement does affect that, that's a certainty, but what else? It's what those listings say, right? So if my page title speaks more specifically to what they're trying to achieve than anything else on the page, I'm increasing my chances of getting that click. And the same is true for a description. So a good exercise to do after you finish today's program is to look at the page titles, which are visible in the very top of the browser when you load your website page. You might have to roll your mouse over it to see the whole thing. It appears in a tab. And look at those page titles. And you might find one of two common mistakes. One, you might find that every page title on your website is the same, which is going to be a detriment to ranking. Or you might find that each page title has, for example, your company name in it. So that's over optimized for your company name and not optimized sufficiently for these specific queries that we've been talking about. And same thing for the descriptions. Are they helpful? Do they entice someone to click? Now, last three tips, we probably should rearrange the order of those just a little bit, because let's talk about fast load time first. We do know that load time is a ranking signal. In fact, Google has been pretty clear on this, which in and of itself is a rarity, because Google can't say how to rank. They can't be very clear about what's in the ranking algorithm, or else we would all just reverse engineer to it. But in one case, they've been very clear, and they've said that page load speed is a ranking signal. Well, they know what you and I can kind of feel, and that is people are incredibly impatient on the web. People don't like to wait. So if they click on a result on a Google search engine results page and that page doesn't load quickly right away, then they have a bad experience. And Google doesn't want to return websites that give users a bad experience. So the linear relationship here is pretty clear. So load time is a key indicator. In fact, Google suggests that your pages load in 2 seconds or under. Now that's an interesting statistic when you compare it to another statistic that says the average business website loads in about 8 seconds. So you see we've got this divergency between what users want, super fast websites, and what the average business website is offering them. Now that fast load time typically comes from images. Now there's a lot of things that affect load time, but the most common impediment to load time are images. Images that are too big, too high of a resolution. On the web, you don't need a lot of resolution like you do if you were printing a photograph in a magazine or in a newspaper. But what happens a lot is that business owners or marketers, they're going to take a picture maybe with their phone, and they send that picture to their web developer, person on the website through the phone, and what pops up? That message that says, oh, do you want to send the large resolution or the medium or the small? And the business owner says, oh, well, it's my website, it's got a great quality, and they send the large, which is a heavier file, more data, when really the small would suffice. So then a lot of business websites have a lot of photos that have way too high of a resolution and are too big. And let me give you some sense of the numbers. Google recommends that an entire page, a web page, should be right about 1 megabyte of data when you put everything together. That's the typography, the code, the images, everything. Put that all together, and the whole file size of the page should be 1 megabyte. There's a pretty good chance that if you went to your website right now, looked at some images, and right-clicked on some of those images, and then looked at properties, you might find some images in and of themselves that are over 1 megabyte. See the problem? So what your browser is trying to do, your browser is following the instructions of your website and trying to load all of the things that are on your page within the bandwidth of the person who's requesting it. And sometimes it gets choked with too many things or things that are too heavy, and that's what causes pages to slow down. So optimizing your images can have a significant impact on your page speed, which can have a pretty good impact on your Google organic ranking. Now, last thing to think about is to optimize for mobile. You know, it's 2020 and we've been talking that it's the year of the mobile for about 3 to 4 years now. And still a lot of businesses are a little slow to grab this truth. Many of you are seeing upwards of 50 to 60% of your visitors come from a mobile device. Well, that means that we as marketers have to start thinking mobile, planning mobile, strategizing mobile. If I were to ask you what your website looks like right now and ask you to create a mental picture of your website, the first thing that should come to your mind should be, what does it look like in mobile? Because a good portion of the people that visit your website will never see that desktop version. And that mobile experience is fundamentally different. So now we're going to talk about two different things, the mobile view and the mobile experience. A lot of people think they're the same, but they're not. A mobile view is relatively easy to achieve. In fact, most website templates have a built-in kind of behind the scenes code that takes the big thing and makes it small. The view is easy. The experience is difficult because in mobile, you've got to have greater separation between lines of text that are clickable. You've got to have buttons that are a little bit bigger because now people are navigating with thumbs and fingers and they don't have the dexterity of a mouse and a cursor. So it's a different design. So if you take the big thing and you simply make it small, you'll achieve a mobile view, but you may not achieve a good mobile experience. And coming up, we're going to talk about some tools where you can get Google's insight on whether or not you're presenting a good mobile experience. And it's called the Test My Site tool, and you can find it at g.co/testmysite. So it's going to do a couple things. It's going to first return that speed that we're talking about, and typically I find that people will do this while they're on the program right now. And so if you get a number back that's pretty significantly more than 2 seconds, you can see that you're kind of sailing directly into the wind in terms of trying to rank well. And it will also give you some insights on whether or not you've got that good mobile experience. There's another free tool that's going to help you appear more in organic searches and appear more throughout Google, and that's called the Google Search Console. And I'll suggest to you that this is the single most valuable tool that is often underutilized by businesses. Google Search Console is kind of like an X-ray machine for your website, and it does a lot of things. But in the interest of time, let me focus on two. Number one, it'll alert you if there's any technical factors that are impeding that Google bot that we talked about in the beginning of the program. What if something's impeding it from crawling all of your pages that you didn't know about? So in Search Console, you'll see, oh, Google found 16 pages or 18 pages. And you might look at that number and go, 16 or 18 pages? My website's 30, 40, 50 pages. Why didn't Google find all of the pages? Quite often, there's some technical limitation from Google crawling all of the pages. And so that's one of the biggest things you'll get out of the Google Search Console. But here's the second and really exciting thing you'll get out of Google Search Console. It'll tell you about the search queries, remember those are the words that people use, that were typed into Google that caused your website to appear on a Google search engine results page, whether you were on page 1 or page 100. So think about that for just a second. What if there was a phrase that people used that had a lot to do with your product and it was very important to your business, and you looked into Google Search Console and you saw, hey, that happened 200 times in the last month, and you got 0 of those clicks? You can almost visualize your best sales prospects looking around, trying to find you, and they never find you. So if you look at that data and you go, whoa, 200 people using this particular phrase that's really impactful for my business, that's a direct pivot on your part for strategy. Then you've got to say, we got to do whatever it takes to rank and get on that Google search engine results page for that particular phrase. So the summary of this particular tool is it's really the best marketing research that you can probably get your hands on. You can find out how do people express themselves when they're looking for what you do, and you can find the quantity that happens, and you can, with almost pinpoint clarity, start charting your digital strategy. Now, the biggest tool that I'm sure you're familiar with is called Google Analytics, and you'll find that at g.co/analytics. With Google Search Console, we've got some insight into people that never visited your website. Google Analytics only deals with people who got to your website. It only deals with people who left footprints. And so then you can find out, well, how effective is your website being with the people that you ultimately attracted? Did they do the things that you wanted them to do? Great websites are designed with a path in mind. What do you want someone to do after visiting your website? What's the end of the journey for them? Do you want them to fill out a quote form? Do you want them to download a catalog? Do you want them to watch a particular video? What is the end journey? And in Google Analytics, it'll tell you, did that happen? And if it did happen, what are the characteristics of the people that did do that? Did they come from a particular city? Were they a particular age? Did they begin their journey on your website on a particular page? Are some pages better first impressions than other first impressions? Is there a selling page on your website right now that is just fundamentally unpersuasive to the people that are visiting it? You don't have to rely on your gut now. You can get that data from Google Analytics, and you can begin making data-driven decisions about improving your digital strategy. And there's lots of really good data out there. And here's a statement that's been affirmed many, many times over in research, that organizations that use a data-driven marketing strategy outperform their competitors that don't use a data-driven strategy. Now, at this point in the presentation, hopefully, we've got you inspired to be thinking about, well, what are those words that people use to find your business? What are those combination words? And once you start to generate a list of those, then it's about prioritizing, because very few companies can rank for all of the phrases that they potentially could rank for. So now it's about prioritizing. So we can use a tool called Google Trends, and you can find that at g.co/trends to help prioritize, because we can put those combination of words that you're thinking about right now into those boxes that you see across the top. And then we can change the geography there on the screen. You see it says Colorado, we can change that to Florida, or depending on the query, we might even be able to change that to a city. And we can start finding out what phrases have volume, and not only what phrases have volume, but at what times of the year do they have volume? I think you're going to find that digital marketing, a lot of ways, is about decoding patterns. And then once you decode that pattern, to use that pattern for your advantage. You know, my grandfather used to say, fish where the fish are, right? And that's what Google Trends is trying to offer you. Yes, there's probably lots of phrases that you could compete for, but let's spend your time and energy on the ones with the highest amount of search volume. And that's what Google Trends returns. The relative, not the absolute, the relative volume among the phrases that you put into this tool. And it's a great way to start prioritizing some of the changes that we've talked about in today's program. So go to g.co trends and enter those phrases that you've been inspired to think about today. And you can narrow down the results by location. Change the date range. I always recommend looking back by year, which is the default, and take a look at those queries and start charting your digital strategy. Now, remember that I just mentioned that there's a variety of phrases that you could rank for, and you simply can't rank for all of them. And a great tool to rank for the ones that want to fill in the gaps are Google Ads. Because while some of the tips we've talked about today do take time to come to realization, right? So some of the things we talked about, if you did them tomorrow, the results don't show up instantaneously. But the really great thing about using Google Ads is that it is near instantaneous. In fact, what I'm about to show you in the next 3 to 4 minutes, I've watched people do in 20 minutes. I've watched people at the end of this program say, yeah, that makes sense. And they have an ad running within 20 minutes at the end of this program. I've watched it over and over again. Now, specifically today, we're going to talk about a smart campaign in Google Ads. A smart campaign taps into all of the data that Google has learned over the years about how people search, the phrases that they use. So Google Ads kind of has a manual program, and it also has an autopilot program. And the autopilot program is what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. They're called smart campaigns. And your ads can appear in one of two places. They can appear on the Google Search Network, which is what we've been talking about for most of today's program, or it can just show on something called the Display Network. And the Display Network are literally millions of websites that have agreed to use Google to sell their ad inventory. And they range from the big to the small, right? It could be the New York Times website. It could be your neighbor that has a blog on gardening that has decided to use this relationship to sell their ad inventory. And you can be on all of those websites through this mechanism. Now, to begin, the process is relatively simple. And you're going to start at ads.google.com. And a recommendation here would be, if you don't already have it, have an account that you use for your business marketing, right? Instead of using your own personal account, use your business name marketing@gmail.com. And then for all of these Google tools, Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Google Ads, if they're all owned by that same email address, then things get really, really simple. Things just work together seamlessly. If they're not all owned by the same address, it can be done, but it gets a little bit more complicated. So using that address, log in at ads.google.com to create your account. And the first two steps you're going to be able to master, of course, because you're just going to enter your business name and your website address, your URL. Now, next you choose a goal. And a goal can be that you want to get more visits to your website. Unlikely anybody on this program wants to drive foot traffic, but that's a goal. Or you can get more phone calls. And once you select one of those goals, it triggers some algorithmic decisions in the background. And in terms of where you want your ads to run, you've got an unbelievable amount of control. You can choose a radius. Here's a physical radius, but radii are often problematic. For example, if like me, you're in Central Florida, and we have a couple clients that are over in Sanford and Lake Mary, people don't cross over the St. Johns River. Don't know why that is, but you would have an easier time getting someone from Deltona to travel to Daytona Beach, which is further, than you do to get them to come into Sanford or Lake Mary for some of the businesses. Strange. But so radii don't always work well, and that's kind of okay because you can hand pick different cities, you can hand pick states, and you can hand pick certain zip codes where you want your ad to run. So the level of finite control you have over who sees your ad is just incredible. Now, next up is you're going to choose a category. And they may not have exactly your category, but that's okay. But find the category that matches most closely with what you do. And then once you do that, it's going to pop up below it and it's going to say, well, you know, other people who've chosen this category, they've advertised these kind of services. And these are actual queries that have matched ads for this category. And you can just then click and turn them off if they're not relevant to what you do. So in this case, what you see on the screen, it's a yoga studio. They put in yoga studio and there's different types of yoga. They may not offer all those different types of yoga, and so they can just simply turn them off. Now the next part is simply writing an ad. And remember, when your ad appears, it's going to appear on a Google search engine results page with other companies' ads. So the goal of this ad is to get your ad to stand out and to generate that click. But here's where a lot of people go wrong. I think they try a little bit too hard. Remember, the ad's job is not to sell your product. The ad's job is to get the click, and it's your website's job to sell your product. So we want to say something differentiating. We want to say something that's benefit driven to this person reading that Google search engine results page to convince them to click. It's really a lot to ask for the ad to sell your product. What you really want the ad to do is get them to click, and your website is designed to then be the salesperson in that area. People are gravitating to this type of advertising because of the level of control, and that control extends to the budgeting. You can pick an amount of money that you want to spend per day. You can change this. There's no long-term agreements. There's no contracts. And you can immediately get some forecasts that if you here's how much you want to spend today, this is how many impressions it'll generate. And based on other advertisers' experience with the decisions that you made, it'll forecast how many clicks that you're going to get. And you can change those numbers. There's a really cool slider bar on there that you can just change, drag it left and right, and see how those numbers change. So no long-term commitments, no contracts. You can change this every day. Wouldn't recommend that, but you could do that. And same thing, you can edit or pause all of this at any time. And one of the great things about any kind of digital marketing, in particular for this, is the ability to see the results in near real time. You know, gone are the days when we buy a newspaper ad and hope for the best, or run an ad in a trade publication and hope for the best. Here, we see what's happening. We get clear reports, and we can make adjustments on the fly to be able to see what people are doing once they visit the website. So if you connect your Google Ads account to your Google Analytics account, not only do you see that they clicked on your ad and they went to your website, now you'll get in-depth data about what did they do once they got there, what pages did they visit, and did they take that action that you really wanted them to act. A new evolution, which I don't think is going to fit for a lot of folks listening to the program today, are smart shopping ads. And Google showed that smart shopping ads took a little bit of effort, and so they've automated these as well, and to use the same kind of algorithmic autopilot approach. So those are available. You can also use Google to run video ads, and there's a lot of really phenomenal research about if your product needs to be seen, to be understood, YouTube is the place to be, because the amount of people that are on YouTube every single hour, every single minute is simply breathtaking. And there's a lot of different types of ads on YouTube. You've probably seen the ads that you have the option to skip. Those are great because you don't pay if somebody decides to skip the ads. You've probably seen short, what are called bumper ads that are great for branding. And you've seen discovery ads that if you go to YouTube and you've searched how do I, because you can put the words how do I, you know, in front of almost any word in the English language and find a video about it. And then on the right-hand side of YouTube, when you do that, there's a bunch of suggested content for that, and those are called video discovery ads. So YouTube has a lot of different ad formats to fit a lot of different purposes. Now we're just about hitting the 51-minute mark, and I know we want to save some time for questions, but let's quickly review some of the things that we talked about today. To use Google more effectively, key is to create a search-friendly website, and there's that word, useful information that loads quickly and works on all devices. Then the second thing we talked about is how to use resources like Google My Business, grab your free business profile, and tools like Test My Site, Search Console Analytics, and Google Trends to start creating a data-driven marketing strategy. And then the last thing we talked about is using online advertising to fill in those gaps and to potentially test. If you're thinking about a phrase today that somebody might use to buy your product, test it before you go to the time and effort to create a organic search strategy. You can test it within 20 minutes by having an ad up and running. Now I'm going to leave this up on the screen for just a second, as I know Sherry's preparing to come back online, and you may want to grab a photograph of this, and remember that Sherry said a recording of this presentation is going to be available too. But these are resources that you can go to for additional information. Now, before we get to the end, if you want to take what we've talked about today a little bit further, there's a great app, and it's called Primer, and it's available at both the Apple App Store and in Google Play. And it's really bite-sized lessons about a lot of topics for digital marketing, and all the lessons are less than 5 minutes each. And I'll tell you what, if you do have idle time, you're waiting for somebody, or maybe you're on the treadmill, you can't beat this, because it is like having your own private tutor for digital marketing, and somebody has put those in easy to consume chunks on that. So I would highly encourage you to download this free app called Primer. There's a whole lot more Google tools available at g.co Skillshop. Skillshop is the new name of Google's training academy. And then finally, if you're an e-commerce business listening, which I don't think you are, there's special tips for you at g.co Grow My Store. And there's videos for small businesses on all kinds of topics at g.co grow/quick help. And you'll find all kinds of things at Grow with Google, google.com/grow, for not only business owners and marketers like yourselves, but for job seekers, developers, and teacher and students. So what's the takeaway on these last slides? If you want to learn it, it's out there for you to get. And I hope today's presentation helped you learn a few things that can help you advance your company's digital strategy. So with that, we'll turn it over to Sherry to see if we had any questions come in for today's program.
Yes, Matt, let's see if we have any questions. Christian, do you see any questions?
Actually, we did have somebody request, can you pull up those web links once more, Matt?
We sure can. I think these are the ones that they're asking for.
Thank you. Question here. If I'm a small business, less than 10 employees, what would be your recommendation on the best starting point to get rolling with the programs that you've discussed?
Yeah, great question. And I'll give two. Number one would be to use Google Trends, and that's at google.com/trends, and start putting in those phrases that you think people are going to use to find what you do. It's a great exercise, because you often find that there's a disconnect between the way that marketers and business owners see the world and consumers see the world. So I would start doing that, and you're going to develop your own list of targeted keywords. Then the next thing that I would do is do that kind of manual exercise of typing in your website into Google, or typing those phrases, those phrases into Google. Use an incognito browser, by the way, so that it doesn't take your past search history into account, and start seeing where your website ranks. And if you find that that you're not ranking for the phrases that can really drive those visits that you need, then I think that you may want to engage a vendor or a specialist to do a website audit. And that's kind of like going to your doctor for your annual physical. And if you do nothing else, you're going to be armed with the data that you need to either hire another vendor to remedy some of those, or you can determine which of those that you can fix yourself. But you need somebody to lay out that here's the 11 things that are preventing you from ranking the way that you need to rank for these phrases. And a good SEO audit does that. It's a great starting point for any organization that wants to create a plan to improve how visible they are on Google.
Thank you. Next question. With Google search and the info you shared here, is it pertinent for both WordPress as well as Webflow platforms?
It is, and I'm not particularly familiar with the Webflow platform, but certainly for WordPress. And WordPress, as you know, is something that's called an example of atomic programming, which means that the frame itself, the chassis, if you will, called WordPress, uses a lot of what are called plugins, kind of add-ons to actually make your website do the things that you want them to do. And there's some really good plugins that tie into today's presentation. There are great SEO plugins, for example, a plugin from Yoast, and it kind of combines some of this research that we've talked about. It actually suggests some descriptions and titles based on what you've written in the page. So it can be a little self-help tool in doing some of these things. There's a plugin that makes connecting Google Analytics very quickly. There's a plugin that makes connecting Google Search Console very, very quick. So yes, WordPress absolutely deals with everything we've talked about today. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the other platform mentioned.
Thank you. Next question. I'd like to get more in depth in digital marketing. Do you have any recommendations?
Yes, Skillshop. I would definitely visit that immediately after today's program. If you Google the phrase Skillshop, you'll get to Google's full program. And man, I gotta tell you, it's deep. So you're gonna find classes there on everything from Google Ads to Google Analytics to Google Tag Manager. It's phenomenal. And here's what's key is that it's Google content. So that's the first place that I would go. Then the second place that I would go would be to look for the official YouTube channels of Google Ads, of Google Analytics, and Google Search Console, and in particular, Google Analytics. Now look for the official Google Analytics channel because, of course, there are a lot of people who have channels about Google Analytics, but they're not coming from Google. And Google puts out great 3 to 4 minute videos about all of the techniques inside Google Analytics and in Google Ads. You know, it's continual. So you can go back years of basic concepts about Google Ads and Google Analytics on their official YouTube channel. So start with the fundamental training at Skillshop and then supplement that with content that's coming from their official YouTube channels.
Thank you. I'll do one last call for any more questions that you might have. Please type them into the question window or you can type them into the chat box. This is a follow-up question to the question that was just asked about digital marketing. If their main interest is Google, I think you answered that. What about Facebook for digital marketing? Do you have any recommendations or any knowledge?
Yeah, if you log into your Facebook Business Manager account, they too have a breadth of content about how to use that tool. And I wouldn't say that it's as substantial as Google's, but they do put out their own content and it's accessible inside your Facebook Ad Manager section. I have not looked for it myself, but I would guess that Facebook has probably has a YouTube channel on the Facebook Ad Manager, and that's worth looking for. But in Facebook, you go into your Ad Manager to see that content, whereas with Google, you don't have to log into your Google Ads account per se to see that content.
That looks to be all the questions that we have for today. So thank you for answering all of those, Matt. And I'm going to pass it over to Sherry now.
Yes, Matt, we'd really like to thank you for your time today. And you've got years of experience in the digital world and obviously the knowledge in the manufacturing industry. So thank you for your time. We know we're very lucky to have you at this time, and we thank you. We'd also like to thank Florida Makes once again for their continued support of Florida manufacturers. We'd like to thank everyone who participated in today's webinar. And if you would like more information about MACF, you can check us out at www.macf.biz. And I understand Matt has more content from Google. So if there are people who would like to see more of these types of webinars from Matt, please visit our website or email us and let us know. And as you exit the webinar, we are seeking your feedback on how to improve these webinars and better meet your needs with topics of value to you. You know, please watch for upcoming webinars through MACF and Florida Makes. And I wish everybody a good day, stay well, and keep manufacturing. And again, Matt, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.